Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Music Technology. Today I'm looking at the Nektar Impact LX49 Plus. It's a MIDI controller. Yeah, I know we're drowning in MIDI controllers. We have so many MIDI controllers. Every week another MIDI controller seems to come out with another seemingly identical set of specifications and features. So how on earth does a MIDI controller stand out from the crowd? Well, the LX49 Plus does it rather interestingly. Now I know that this isn't a new release, it's been out a little while, but it's a sort of MIDI controller that's gone under the radar a little bit. People don't seem to be that clued in as to what it is that this can offer. Now I know that every MIDI controller's got some kind of angle. Native Instruments, for instance, theirs is all about their complete software and how it integrates with that and controls all their own plugins. The Novation ones are heavily into Ableton Live, and there's lots of Launchpad stuff as well as some interesting arpeggiation going on. The Arturia ones are all about control voltage and sequencing and running their own analog lab software. Then you've got the M Audio, Alesis and Akai ones, which are kind of all the same and all revolve around that Akai software that allows you to map stuff to plugins within it. So amongst all of this MIDI control, what could the Impact 49 Plus possibly have to offer? Well, Nektar have a different approach to things, and their secret sauce, their superpower, lies in their integration with individual DAWs. So the Impact LX49 doesn't like to be a generic controller. No. It likes to have scripts which are running in the background, which offers a level of integration that you don't actually see with any other MIDI controller. And it's that integration that I want to attempt to show you, to get across to you, to demonstrate to you as to why this is actually pretty awesome. It's a time saver. It's great for working with a DAW, and it could save you a load of time because it kind of just works. Mostly. I mean, it's not perfect. I'm going to be saying this a lot and pointing this out a lot, is that what the Impact attempts to do is to provide automatic mapping to both mixer controls and instruments simultaneously. And actually that's really difficult to do, particularly with the range of different sorts of plugins out there with different sorts of MIDI control, different sorts of parameters. I mean, this is one of those things that MIDI 2.0 is attempting to sort out, I think. But Nektar Tech kind of do this already. And despite the vast array of different ways that things are mapped and programmed to work, the Impact 49 Plus gets it right kind of the majority of the time. And that's no mean feat. And at the end of the day, if it's not exactly what you were hoping for, you can always map it to the controls that you need. So for the purposes of this review or demonstration, I'm going to run a few DAWs, a few different instruments, just to show how well this will integrate into whatever DAW you're going to use. Now it works slightly differently depending on the DAW you're running it into, and so if I get confused, that's purely because I've been running it with lots of different DAWs and I'm not exactly fluid in all of them. But once you get this plugged into the DAW that you use all the time, then the workflow and the fluidity is just awesome. So let me bring you in, get a bit closer, and let's see if we can work out what this is all about. So the physicality of the controller itself. I mean, this is 110, 115 pounds worth of MIDI controller, so it's right there in the middle of everything. Everybody has something around that sort of price, and it matches up, you know, pretty good. It's got a piano style keyboard rather than a synth style one, so it has a little bit of weight to it, a little bit of solidity to it, while still being a bit clangy and a bit plasticky as £100 MIDI controllers are. The feel though and the dynamics, it's nice. It's just a USB keyboard. It's powered via USB. It has a single port on the back for a sustain pedal, but other than that there's no MIDI outs or CV outs or any other jiggery pokery going on. It's purely a USB MIDI controller for a computer. You've got a modulation wheel, pitch wheel over here, octave buttons, as well as transpose buttons. Which is handy. You've got 9 sliders over here, which is mostly for DAW control, but also for synth control, which I will show you what that means a little bit later on. It's got buttons here. It's got 8 knobs. The knobs are all right. Feel like MIDI controller knobs. Nothing particularly special about them, but they do the job. Over here you've got 8 pads. These are drum pads. Which of course would work if I was running some kind of drum patch, but I'm not. But they're surprisingly dynamic. They use colour to indicate some different modes, and one of the interesting things about them is that you can map the pads where they are, what MIDI notes they are playing, from your keyboard. You just press a couple of buttons, bang, and these are remapped to a different place on your keyboard depending on where the samples are that you want to trigger, or the drums are that you want to trigger. Very, very simple and quick. That's something about this keyboard, is that it makes everything quick and easy to adapt to your way of working. Has some transport controls here and some magic stuff going on in the middle, but you know, largely it's a MIDI controller. It controls MIDI. So to get to the more interesting stuff, let's dive into our first DAW, which is Cubase. What I'll do is I'm going to bring up one of Cubase's own synths, the retro log. Let's load up a patch. Did you see that, how I loaded up a patch from here? Didn't do anything, didn't have to set anything up. I just pressed a patch button here and it selected the next patch. You also notice how I control the volume of it just here. I'm just kind of hinting at things really. So what is it that this does that's interesting? Well, in instrument mode, got that here. I can open and close the instrument GUI, and then these knobs here do exactly what they say. Cut off, resonance, tuning, level on one of the oscillators, modulation on an oscillator, Okay, cool. So these knobs are mapped more or less automatically to this without me having to do anything. I haven't had to MIDI learn them. I haven't had to go into any kind of anything. It's all there straight away. Now these sliders over here, now you're probably thinking, oh yeah, so they're probably going to be level control. And you'd be right. I mean, if I bring up the mixer, I've got level control. And you think, yeah, okay, so that's Mackie control, that's fine. I mean, most MIDI controllers allow some kind of Mackie control or Hui control emulation over a DAW, which gives you control of the mixer and gives you control over transport controls, which I've got here. The Impact LX49 Plus is no different in that regard, except that it can do mixer control and instrument control using the same parameters and the same sliders. On any other MIDI keyboard, once you've mapped something to something, it's mapped to it. And it's there and it's forever controlling it. If you turn on Mackie control or Hui control, these faders will always be doing that. Whereas if I go back to my instrument, these are controlling the envelope. I've always got a volume control, always. Or if I want to go back to the mixer, I just hit mixer and I can control the level of it, if I can find it, there. Go back to instrument control and it's now controlling the sustain again, or the attack. And that in essence is the beauty of the Nektar system. It has this multi-layered approach where you have an instrument layer where everything is involved in that, and then you have a mixer layer that does the things you expect faders and transport controls to do. And none of it is dependent on Mackie control or other sorts of emulation. It's using its own technology, its own scripts that you install into Cubase. That's just a matter of double clicking a file and maybe checking a couple of settings, and the whole thing is just there. And you've got individual scripts for different DAWs, and they are already written to control everything that comes with that DAW. And I suppose you're thinking, yeah, okay, so they've written a script for Cubase, but what about if you want to use other instruments? Alrighty then. So let's use something like the Minimoog from Arturia. Oh, by the way, I didn't say, this is a Surface. Everyone always asks. This is a Surface Pro, a Microsoft Surface Pro. It's not an iPad, not an iPad. This is running Windows, running desktop software. These are normal desktop applications. Cubase, DAWs, etc. This is not an iPad. Good. Alright, so I turned it down. Let's turn everything back up. So this is the Mini V from Arturia. I haven't mapped it, I haven't done anything to it, I've just loaded it up. Let's see what these knobs control. Cutoff is there on the cutoff knob. Filter, emphasis or resonance. That's also there. Envelope amount. Yeah. LFO. No, that one doesn't seem to be doing anything. Okay, oscillator tune. Yeah. Oscillator level. Yeah, there. That's glide. Let's have a look at the envelopes. We've got loudness control envelope there. And filter. There. So that mapping is already there. Now, a Minimoog is kind of the traditional way that a synthesizer is set up, and so it's not that hard to guess at what those controls are supposed to be. But the fact that it is automatically there straight away without me having to fuss about is just fantastic. Before I move on to another DAW for another example, I just wanted to throw in how quickly you can map something. Now this is the Super 8. It's small on my screen because of the high definition pixel count on the Surface, and some things aren't easy to resize, but that's by the by. And so I've turned this one on. It has no mapping. I've not done any mapping. And looking at a few things, it's kind of mapped to strange stuff. I mean, kind of by default, it ends up doing itself just in a row across something. So all the controls tend to end up being mapped to something which might seem sensible in the software world but isn't necessarily sensible to us. So what I want frequency, cutoff, and I want resonance, and I want the envelope and bits and pieces to work. Or maybe I want to map them to something slightly different, like the level of the waveforms over there. That's an interesting idea. Now, this has a system which allows you to do that. Let me see if I can get that to work. Let me do those first four. If I hold shift, I should be able to move these four parameters like that, and then move that, that, and that, and it's mapped. That's just brilliant. Did you see that? Did you see that? It's just mapped, just like that. I could do something similar over here. Hold shift. I've got frequency and I've got resonance. I release, so there's my cutoff. and there's my resonance, and it's mapped. And if I hit shift a couple of times, it will save that within itself, so that next time I open up Super 8, it will be mapped in exactly the same way. And while I'm doing all that, I can hit mixer, and it's back to controlling the mixer. It's ignoring that, it's just controlling the mixer. Back to instrument, and it's controlling all of those. Something you might notice is the soft pickup that it does, which is quite interesting. So if I go to the mixer, let me pull that all the way down to the bottom, go to the mixer, push that up. So now this fader is no longer connected or relevant to the parameter it was moving on the instrument. If I go back to the instrument, I can move this and nothing will happen until I pick up where it currently is. So I go all the way down to the bottom, it will then pick it up and start to move it in. The reason why that's interesting or important is because you get no jumping of parameters. So often when you're moving from different systems or different patches and you've got a MIDI controller, the parameter will jump to wherever it is that MIDI controller is. But it's even better than that, because when I go between two different things, the display here will tell me which direction the parameter is I need to pick it up. So if I go back to instrument, it will tell me as I hold this one that it needs to go up in order to grab that parameter. And then there it is. Awesome. Just brilliant. What a fantastic thing. Let's move on to Studio One. Studio One, the MIDI. See, it's all there. Envelope, you can see that moving. And you can see the catch up as well. Volume is always there. Of course I can go to the mixer. There's not a whole lot to see in the mixer just yet, just the one channel, but that's all there. And of course the knobs are pan. Back to the instrument. Everything is there without me having to have mapped anything. Let's try another third party one. I quite like this fella here. That's mapped. Those ones aren't quite so much. So let's see if I could do the old grabbing parameter thing again. It's shift and then envelope. Let's see whether that works. It's shift, move the envelope, move the parameter. Does that work? No, not quite. How do I do that one? Shift, turn it, move it, turn it. Yes, okay. See, Cubase and Studio One do it slightly differently. I managed to get it there in the end. It's just a matter of getting the right combination of things. So if I try that again, I'm going to move this LFO one. Oh, that's also connected to that one now. I don't want that. So I'm going to press this one. shift press that one and move this. And yes, you see I've got it now attached to the LFO, and that one's still attached to the envelope. Cool, got out of that all right. See how brilliant is that? Now you've got other things like you can step up and down in tracks, so I can go back to my other one, I can go back to this all from the keyboard. There's also patches. Doesn't do anything with this because it depends on the patch system. If the patch system is built into the DAW, this will do that thing. If it's got its own preset patch system, which many synths do, then it's not going to have any effect on that. And of course, moving from synth to synth, you'll see the soft pickup when I hit the right value on the cutoff, so you don't get any jumping. So I can put that all the way up, go to the other track, and nothing happens until I actually hit that parameter. And then it starts to come down. It's beautiful. Swap to mixer, bring the mixer up. Can I get rid of that? Yes, I can. And I've got my control over my two tracks there, and I've got my panning. Brilliantly elegant. And of course, if you have a synthesizer for which none of this stuff is automatically working, you can switch to user and just use MIDI mapping like you would with any other DAW, any other synth, any other thing. It will work like a regular, dumb, generic MIDI keyboard if that's what you want, or you're using some DAW that this doesn't yet fully support. You can just use it like any other MIDI controller, so there's no loss. You're not lost anything in this clever integration. It adds to it. It puts on another layer, puts on another thing. And for the most part, it just works. Let's try the drum pad thing over here. So let's bring in impact. I can use the patch buttons to load up a patch because it's an integrated synth and it understands that. So there they are mapped to the keyboard, and those first 8 notes are also mapped to the pads. Whoa! Now say you want that to be mapped somewhere else. You want that kick, you don't want that rim shot, you want that to be something else. You want it to be that. So you can go shift, pad, learn, that one, I think, and that should be it. See, now it's that. Very easy. I want it to be that one. So shift, pad, learn, that one. Oh, let's make it that then. Shift, pad, learn, and now it's that. Etc. Nice. So, but of course these knobs are all pitched in as well. So I've got my filter cut off thing, probably need to turn that on or something. Simple, brilliant, fast, integration that's there. And if you start working with your DAW, you start working with this in your chosen recording platform, you can make it smooth and awesome and have anything that's not quite exactly as you want it to be, you can move and edit and map that about and get it completely sorted. So what DAWs is it immediately compatible with? Well, Cubase, Studio One, as you've seen, Reason as well, I'll give you a quick look at that. It has a lot of great support in FL Studio, in Bitwig, in Reaper, Cakewalk. So let's add in a couple of Reason synths. Load up another patch. That's there. Go to another track. And then of course you go to the mixer and it's all there. You've got your panning, you've got your levels. Now while I could be showing DAW after DAW after DAW, I just want to spend a little bit of attention in Bitwig Studio because it has a little extra within this awesome piece of software. So if we start off just by using the polysynth. Which is the inbuilt one. I've got patch selection again. So we'll choose something suitable. And our usual controls are all there, waiting for us. It has a couple of extra special bits. First one is to do with the layered instrument. You can create an instrument layer within Bitwig where you can load up a couple of different things. So with an instrument layer, let me stick in a polysynth. Put in a patch or two. So within the instrument layer I've now got two synthesizers and I can use the pads here, which colour differently, to actually move between them. So I'm controlling the zenith. Press the other pad and I'm controlling somewhere in there the bulge. I'll bring up the GUI and so on. A poor demonstration, and I'm not entirely sure that it's completely working all the time. I seem to have to move out and move back in order to get that to fully engage, but it's an extra level of integration that isn't there in another DAW. So in Bitwig these pads have another feature, which is that they can be used for clips and scene navigation and creation of stuff. So I can select a clip, for instance, and record straight into it. I then go to another track and stick something else in. I can start making up another scene. I can swap between scenes. It's not masses of control, you haven't got an entire grid like on a launch pad or something like that, but you do have some useful, instant, accessible control over some clips and some scenes. Without the DAW side of the integration, the Impact LX49 Plus just acts like any other keyboard. So I can go in, I can touch a parameter, and I can map it. Like so. So it's completely at home, being a regular generic MIDI keyboard as well as all the shenanigans it has in various DAWs. Nektar have done something very clever with the LX49 Plus. They've attempted to create a MIDI controller that provides instant control within your DAWs without you having to worry about it, without you having to go through and map stuff, without having to use a complex piece of software to try to pull everything together. It just wants to let you get on with making the music. You start up your DAW, start up your keyboard, and everything is already there. I mean, surely that's the thing that we've always and forever been after. But actually there's no real magic going on, it's purely just hard work. The people at Nektar have got down, sat down and mapped absolutely everything that's within that DAW to the right control so that it works properly, and when you shift from one thing to another it picks all the right stuff up. So at the end of the day it is just MIDI control, it's just that all of the hard work's been done for you. But because there's no actual magic involved, it means that how well it works comes down to the plugins that you're using and the DAW that you're using, because these DAWs change, plugins change, instruments change. As soon as they do another update for it, some bits may not work like they did before, and so Nektar have to go back and remap everything every time. And they can't ever hope to support absolutely every synth automatically just like that. And so while this does go further than any other keyboard I've come across to that ideal of having just everything set up ready to go, it still doesn't quite make it with everything. However, there are two places that it really does excel: Cubase and Studio One. Should also work in Reaper. I haven't tried it, but Reaper apparently uses the exact same system as Cubase, and so that all should be reflected in how well that works also. But what you get is that mixer control and then the switch instrument control on all of the inbuilt instruments in both Studio One and Cubase. It works just flawlessly. It's there completely. Switch to mixer, it all works. Panning controls, mixing, switch back to instrument, all the internal instruments are just in there and grabbed and working, so you can start it up, plug in the keyboard and you're off. And that is totally brilliant. And then for the bits and pieces that aren't yet mapped, like additional third-party synthesizers and bits and pieces, the grab control where you hit shift and whittle a knob and it's grabbed, and those things are kept within Cubase. In Cubase, you have to hit a button a couple of times in order to save it to the profile. In Studio One, it's just saved with the plugin when you make the connection. And so very, very quickly, you can build up complete control of everything within Cubase, Studio One, and quite possibly Reaper. It's simple, it's elegant. The very fact that they've written these things in blue on the keyboard to suggest that that is always going to be cut off, that is always going to be resonance, and these things are always available, is a sign of how confident Nektar are in how well that can work. And also, I mean, it makes sense when you have a generic controller with no labels on it at all, you end up, you know, mapping stuff to wherever. But with the labeling, it encourages you to do the same thing all the time, which means that increases that muscle memory. So you're always going to reach for this knob for cutoff. You're always going to be reaching for this one. And it's going to be right because it's encouraging you to map those to be the ones that it says. Does that make sense? In other DAWs, the support is a little bit different. I mean, Reason's really very good, but there are some quirks regarding, you know, regular trying to access other bits of MIDI control. FL Studio has its own way of doing things, but there's a good level of mixer and instrument integration. Ableton Live is a bit of a weird one. I mean, everybody loves Ableton Live. All controllers seem to have special things built into them expressly for Ableton Live. Not so much this one. This does the mixer. But that's all it can do, is the mixer, whereas the knobs control the devices, and that all works fine, but you seem to be stuck with this single layer of control rather than the multi-layer that we get with Cubase and Studio One, and that's very interesting. But then when you look at Bitwig, Bitwig has some really good deep control, where you have the mixer, panning control, and then the instrument control, but then this extra stuff with the layered instruments over on the pads, and also clip launching and scene launching, which is the sort of thing you expect to see in Ableton, but is actually working better and properly in Bitwig Studio. And then, of course, you can put the whole DAW integration thing aside and just use it as a generic MIDI controller. These are knobs, these are sliders, they have MIDI control numbers, and you can map them to whatever you like. You have preset layers in here where you can set up the controls to be whatever MIDI controllers you like and learn them like you would any other thing. So there's absolutely no loss in having the Impact 49 Plus as opposed to any other generic controller, and you get the potential for a whole lot more. For instance, I've got up here the Cherry Audio 2600, which isn't necessarily completely officially supported, because Nektar have also written, you know, scripts for hundreds of third-party instruments. You see it when you install the script. You get things like Serum, Spin Up, and Diva, and, you know, Yuhi instruments, and a whole raft of other instruments are already programmed. So when you dump them into Cubase, DAW, Reason, or whatever, they are mapped and ready to go. But not everything. The Cherry Audio stuff is newer. They don't have automatic maps for that as far as I can tell. But the whole shift thing, grab thing, totally works. And I've got cutoff and resonance mapped on here just by touching something and making it happen. Like, for instance, I can go to something else, like, I don't know, that one. Let's go for that one, for this. And then that's completely not mapped, you see? That's just brilliant, isn't it? See, and I get in a muddle again because it's different depending on what one you're doing. But if I hold Shift and then move this bit of the envelope here, for instance, and then move this one about and then release, that seems to have it. That's now got it. So this is grabbing and picking those up pretty quickly once you know the combination of buttons. And you're not having to go into their MIDI Learn engine in order to achieve that, if that makes sense. So once again, the Impact is making things faster, quicker, simpler, with a completely random third-party instrument. Now, Nektar also do this big flashy piece of software called Nektarine, which works with their higher-end MIDI controllers, and it's very much like the Akai VIP software or Complete Control. So if you want that all-encompassing, you know, hardcore and intense mapping of everything all the time and want to set up big profiles for your entire studio, then you can absolutely do that on the bigger brothers and sisters of this particular keyboard. But for the Impact LX49 Plus, it's supposed to be simple, straightforward, out of the box, into Cubase, into Studio One, and working. And that's exactly what it is. And that's what makes it pretty awesome in my book. So there you are, the Nektar Impact LX49 Plus, there's a 61 key version and there's a 25 key version, I think. All of them knocking around 100 quid. You get an 8-track version of Bitwig in the box, so you're up and running, ready to go immediately. But it's a fantastic choice as a good, decent, affordable MIDI controller for Cubase and Studio One and others and anything else as well. I hope that's helpful, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.